We are in the second week of our Relationship Rehab series. If you were here, you know the first week we talked about what it meant to be a true friend. A friend is someone who will fight alongside of you, one who will fight for you even when you're not there, and one who will sometimes fight even in spite of you. A true friend will tell you when you're wrong. A true friend will give you advice you may not want to hear. A true friend will be there through all the situations. Week 2, we talked about success in the single life. And if you weren't here for that, I just want to encourage you. You may want to watch that. You can go to our website under media, and all those messages are there. And you may want to watch those if you weren't here, or even send those on to somebody that you may know as well. And today we're going to continue that with a message I've entitled Marriage Makeover. Marriage Makeover. Now, ladies, let me just ask you a question. How many of you dreamed about your wedding before you even met the man you're married to? How many of you ladies dreamed about your wedding even before the man you're married to? Okay. Only about 4 of you. All right. But many times we do that. Many times we think about getting married long before we've even met the person we're going to marry. I told y'all last week of how when I was single and how I came to meet Monica, and really what came down to me sitting there and analyzing what would my life be like down the road if I married her or if I had pursued a couple of those other folks. But one of the things that happens is when we begin to think about marriage, and it usually, maybe in middle school, but usually high school or right after high school, whether it be college or career or whatever we may be doing, we begin to think about something. We begin to think about what our desires are. What our desires are. And we begin to think about what kind of home we're going to live in. Right? Don't we think about that? Hey, I want, it used to be the white picket fence, but there aren't many white picket fences anymore. And so we dream about what kind of house would we want to have? What kind of house would we want to live in? We even dream about who we're going to marry. We think about that. We think about, hey, who are we going to marry? And ladies, don't get mad at your man if he just looked up here and saw a Barbie because you thought about who you were going to marry. Right? Or maybe you're into superheroes, ladies. And so you thought, man, if I could just meet Spider-Man. You thought about that. Or maybe you're into WWE superstars. And so, ladies, you thought about who you were going to marry too. We thought about what kind of car could we drive. Man, I'd love to have this kind of car, that kind of car. And of course, this is in Georgia, so this is probably what you were thinking about when you thought about, man, I just hope someday I can get that car. I can have that. You have that desire to get that car. You had a thought about all the money you're going to make. How am I going to make it? How am I going to make all this money? I mean, I've got all these dreams of a house and a monster truck and all that. How am I going to make all that money to buy all that? Right? And so that just went into your bucket of desires. You may have even had thoughts of, who's going to do the dirty laundry? Who's going to do the laundry? I just can't wait to have somebody who's going to do the laundry for me. I can't wait to have somebody who's going to clean the house. If I'm going to have this big house, I've got to have somebody who's going to clean the house for me. That's going to be so awesome. And maybe even, guys, maybe even you had the thought of what your wife was going to wear to bed at night, right? And you just thought, man, I can't wait till I meet her. And she just comes to bed in that snuggly. That's not Monica's. She's back there. That's not Monica's. It comes from my house, but no, it's not mine. But you just thought, man, I just can't wait to get married, and I just know, and then some day she comes out and something like that, maybe not a snuggly, but something like that, and you're like, wow. Maybe you even thought about, I can't wait to be married to somebody who's going to cook for me. I just can't wait. When Monica and I were dating, I told her, I said, I'm not going to marry you until you've cooked at least 7 different meals. Because no matter how bad things get, I want to know that for 7 nights of the week we could have a variety of dinner meals. And I was just sort of maybe joking about that, but it was funny because when I went to pick her up for our next date, we usually went out to eat because she was off at college, and so I'd make sure she got one good meal, during the week, and so we would go out to eat. And when I showed up, she said, "Come on in, I'll fix supper." And her first meal for me was meatballs and gravy and mashed potatoes, a crescent roll, and I think green beans. I'm not sure about the green bean part, and then she made spaghetti the next week, and she got through the 7 real quick. But that was one of the things I had told her that I wanted in a wife, and that I wanted to know that, that would happen. And here's what happens is we think about these desires. We grow up on these desires in a lot of cases. And when we start looking around for who we're going to marry, we think about these desires. But here's the problem. The problem is when we say I do, these desires turn into expectations. And they go from one day I want to have to now I expect you to do for me. I expect you to clean the house. I expect you to cook the meals. I expect you to make sure I have a really nice house. I expect you to get me the kind of car. I expect you to make all the money that we're going to need or whatever. And we begin to, as a husband and wife, put expectations on each other. Now, I'm going to just tell you today, I'm going to give you a guarantee. If you will hear today's message, apply it, that's the key part, what I'm going to tell you today will make every marriage better. You may be here today and you say, well, we've got a pretty good marriage. Well, I'm just telling you, this will make it better. You may be here today, so you know what? We've got a great marriage. Couldn't ask for it. These principles today will make your marriage better. Or you could be here today and you say, you know what? We don't have that good of a marriage. In fact, maybe you're here today and you're like, we're sort of almost at the end of the rope on our marriage. And I'm here to tell you that if you will hear these principles today and apply them, they will make your marriage better. Because one of the things that happens is when we get married, as soon as we say, I do, we begin to put these expectations on each other, right? I expect you to do this. I expect you to do that. One of the expectations that Monica and I had for one another when we got married was we grew up in 2 totally different homes when it come to house cleaning. I grew up in a home, and by my mom, my stepmom, and my grandmother, I never cleaned the house. I never cleaned. When I was 18, I got a new bedroom suit. All that was asking me that I would make my bed every day before I left for work or college or whatever. And that was all that was ever asking me. Now, I mowed the grass outside. You've heard, or I mowed the dirt outside. We never really had grass, but I mowed the dirt, and that was sort of maybe my thing to do. But I never did that. I never did laundry. I was only asked, hey, make sure your laundry gets in the basket. And on Saturdays, I didn't know if we had a dry cleaner come in or whatever, but on Saturday somehow it all got washed, dried, and folded, put back on top of my bed. I just had to put, that was all that was asked of me. Now, Monica, in her house, growing up, the whole family got up on Saturday morning, and you didn't do anything else until the house was clean. They folded, dried, folded, and put up towels and rags, clothes, all of that. They dusted and vacuumed the whole house. They cleaned the bathrooms in the house. They mopped the floor. Like, if you want to go on a date, tell your boyfriend, come over here and get a mop, because the quicker we get done, the quicker you can go out on a date. I mean, they didn't do anything on Saturday until the house was clean. So you can imagine how the first few months of our marriage went. On Saturday mornings, Monica would get up and she would start the laundry and she would start cleaning some stuff, and I would sit on the couch and watch ESPN. Because what was happening, I was expecting her to do what I had always known, what had always been done for me, and she's expecting me to do for her like she had seen her dad do for in her household. And so we began putting these expectations on each other. And here's the key. When we put expectations on each other, either way, whether your expectations are met or otherwise, they lead to your happiness. Right? Monica was not real fond of me on Saturday mornings. In fact, to be quite honest with you, a lot of our opinions of each other and of our lives in the early months and maybe even years of our marriage were based on our expectations of each other. I was expecting her to do some things. She was expecting me to do some things. We got married. We had this little, it was a small third floor apartment, and she's expecting me to get up on Saturdays and help clean, and I'm expecting, hey, you get up on Saturdays and clean, and I'm going to hold down this couch. And so I'm just being truthful and transparent. I mean, the first few years of our marriage was sort of this, I expect you to, well, I expect you to, back and forth. And that never worked. But the truth of the matter is, those expectations that we put on one another do lead to our happiness. Right? And so, in fact, I found this scientific study. It's funny when scientific studies work in your favor. And so I found this study by two scientists, and I was going to try to describe it. Let me just read it to you. It is an election year, right? It is an election year. It says, of all the ways people can brag about superiority of their political beliefs, I'm happier is a curious choice. So if a Republican says, I'm happier than a Democrat or vice versa, is a curious choice. But a new study from the University of Virginia, Professor Brad Wilcox, and the University of Utah professor, Nicholas Wolfinger, gives Republicans the chance to do just that. In conservative counties, I would say Houston County is a conservative county. In a conservative county in the United States, the researchers argued that people are more likely to get married, stay married, and less likely to have kids out of wedlock if they're Republican. Yeah, gives Republicans a chance to do that. It says they are more likely to get married, stay married, and less likely to have kids out of wedlock. And if you ask them, they're more likely to say they're very happy in their marriages. So in case you watched the debate the other night and said, I'm not voting for either of these jokers, I'm just going to encourage you, one, you should vote, and if you want to be happy in your marriage, maybe give you a little incentive there. So desires turn to expectations the moment we say I do. And these expectations lead to our happiness. And to be quite honest with you, and I'm sure you've experienced this if you've been married any length of time, there's going to be those expectations that fail us. And so a lot of times our happiness in our marriage, our happiness with our spouse, is based off of the expectations that we're having for them or that they're meeting or not meeting for us. And here's the problem with that. The problem is I am at the center of my happiness. I, me, mine, I want, it's my way. I am at the center of my happiness. And I know from experience that when I make me the center of my happiness, that I'm going to be frustrated. I might even get angry. Monica would tell you that for me personally, I withdraw. Sometimes she'll even say, what's wrong with you? And if I say nothing, she knows that means something's wrong with me. Because when I'm angry and frustrated, a lot of times I withdraw. Now get this, everything I've said to you so far, everything is true whether you're here today and you're a believer in Christ or whether you're here today and you're not. Everything I've said so far up into this message has been applicable to you whether you have a vibrant relationship with Christ or whether you're even here today and say, you know what, I don't even know about this God thing. I'm just checking it out. I'm not real sure about what you're talking about. But what I've said so far in this message is true for every single person, every single one of us in this room, whether we're a believer or not. And in fact, if you go to a counselor, a marriage counselor, one of the most popular phrases that they hear is, he's not meeting my needs, right? She's not meeting my needs. That'll be the first thing you say when you go to a marriage counselor. Or you could be saying, he's not meeting my expectations. She's not meeting my expectations. In fact, if I had a nickel for every time a marriage counselor heard those phrases, I could be retired sitting by a pool in Destin right now. But you go into it with these expectations, and a lot of times we say, well, he's not meeting my expectations. She's not meeting my expectations. And the problem with that is you are at the center of your happiness. It's all about you. And what I want to propose to you today is one of the differences is between, if you go to a secular counselor, they're going to use this word and talk to you about compromise. Well, y'all need to compromise. You need to give 100%. You need to give 100%. You need to compromise. Hey, you need to give a little bit of this. You need to give a little bit on this. Hey, you need to give a little bit on this, and then she'll give a little bit on that. They're going to talk all about this compromise, and the problem with that approach is compromise does nothing to change the heart. Compromise is nothing more than an external I give, you get. I'm going to reduce on this, you're going to reduce on that. It's just an external action with nothing changing on the inside. Now, a Christian counselor is going to attack the same problem, probably come up to the same conclusion. The problem is you're at the center of your happiness. That's why you're frustrated when he doesn't meet your expectations or she doesn't meet your expectations. That's going to be the problem, but the diagnosis is going to be different. The treatment of the problem is going to be different because the treatment, the biblical counselor is going to come at it from an angle based on principles from the Scriptures that talk about who God is, who Jesus Christ is, and what He did on the cross for us, for our salvation through Him, for the ability through Him for internal life change, a change of our heart toward our spouse, not just a change of our action towards our spouse. And so as we do this biblical makeover, that's sort of what I want to talk about. In Ephesians chapter 5, we come to a passage of Scripture that talks about marriage, and it gives us some biblical principles that we can think about and look to. Ephesians chapter 5. If you want to follow there, we'll be there for the morning. It'll be up behind me, I think, if you need it. But verse 21 picks up. It says, and further, and you can read the first part of chapter 5. It's all about living in Christ. And further, this is for husbands and wives, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another. It's an idea of mutual submission. It's an idea of the husband and the wife both together submitting into one another. It's not a winner-loser situation. So many times in marriages, when you dial down into the problems and the issues, it's because someone's always trying to become the winner, which always makes somebody a loser, right? I mean, even if you're in an argument or you're in a debate or you're just talking about or making a decision and somebody wins, that automatically means somebody just lost. It's not the idea of a boss and employee relationship. It's not the idea of a debt and a debtor relationship. It's the idea of both of us, husband and wife, submitting to one another. It's not putting expectations on the other. It's asking yourself, what can I do to make their life better? What can I do today to submit to them? What can I do today to help them? What can I do today to make their life better instead of waking up and going, what can I do today to make me happy? What can I do today to make my life better? As a married couple, we ask ourselves, what can we do today to make the other life better? And I saw a beautiful illustration of this Friday. I go into Dairy Queen over Courtney Hodges Boulevard, and Mr. Benny is sitting there. When I pulled up, I thought that was his truck, but I go in there, and Mr. Benny is in Dairy Queen. I'm like, and then, of course, I'm so smart. I'm like, what are you doing here? You're at Dairy Queen. What do you think I'm doing? I mean, but he said, I'm just picking up some lunch. Hey, me too. That's pretty cool. The difference was he was picking up lunch for his wife. And he was at Dairy Queen, and I know I saw a milkshake, but I don't know if there was a hamburger or hot dog or whatever, but he stopped by there to pick up some lunch to take to his wife where she was at work to make her day a little better. I mean, hey, a Dairy Queen milkshake will make any day better, right? That's just the idea of he was saying, what can I do to make her life better today, or maybe even make this afternoon better today? And it's that idea that we submit to one another, but get this, we submit to one another out of a reverence for Christ. We submit to one another out of a reverence for Christ. We don't submit to one another of seeing what I can get away with or see what I can get. We don't submit to one another, again, trying to be the winner and make them the loser. We submit out of a reverence for Christ. That word reverence there means awe. Just sort of a wow. Just sort of this idea of this reverence for Christ of what He has done for us. Because, He has done so much, right? Out of what He has done for us. Out of all of that, if you're a believer, you should know that. You should have experienced that in your salvation and your forgiveness. Just out of reverence for that, of all of that, we say, what can we do to submit to our spouse? So it says, submit to one another out of a reverence for Christ. Because you see, a biblical marriage is not I-focused, but it is Christ-focused. It's not I-focused. It's not about me. It's not about it's not about what do I want. It's about Christ. And if we will have in our marriages the view of Christ and what He has done for us, if we will live our lives in light of what Christ has done for us, then our marriages will be better, because we'll be saying to ourselves, what can I do to make my spouse's day better? What can I do to make my spouse's life better? And if both of the spouses will do that, there will be a change in our marriages. Verse 22 picks up some instructions for the wives. It says, for wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For a husband is the head of his wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of His body, the church. As the church submits to Christ, so you wives should submit to your husbands in everything. Now, you have to... There was a time when women would read that verse and say, I'm not submitting to nobody. There was it was a few generations ago, but there was a movement, especially in our country, where even in churches, women would read that verse and go, I ain't submitting to nobody. I don't know who you're talking to. They would just get defensive about it. And truth be told, there were some men who had taken that verse and twisted it all up too, to where they just thought they had their thumb on their wives. So there was error on both parts, but that's not what it's saying here. In fact, if you get stuck on that, think about this. In those verses there, the husband is only referenced 3 times, while Christ is referenced 4 times. You see, even when you read that, it's not about your husband. It's about Christ. It's not about your husband and submitting to him, and again, this mutual submission, but it's about Christ and what He has done for His church and His body. Think about that for a minute. What has Christ done for the church? Well, one, He left the comfort of heaven to come to earth. He lived a life of being totally human. He set aside His deity for a while. He set aside his godly power for a while. We know that because it said He got hungry. If he didn't do that, He wouldn't have been hungry. We know that because at any time He could have stopped the crucifixion. We know that at any time He could have done all sorts of things. So He set it aside for a time. He took a whipping like you ain't ever seen. If you've ever seen The Passion of the Christ, you know that it was brutal and it was gory. He took the nails in His hands and His feet. He took the crown of thorns on His head. He hung on the cross and died for our sins. Now, ladies, you might got a good man, but he ain't done that for you. Your guy, he might be a great guy, but he took no whipping. He ain't taking no nails. He ain't taking no crown of thorns. That's why you read this, and it's so much more about who Christ is and your relationship to Christ as it is to who your husband is and your relationship to Him. Now, men, He gives us some instructions as well. Verse 25, it says, for husbands, this means love your wives just as Christ loved the church. He gave up His life for her to make her holy and clean, washed by the cleansing of God's Word. He did this to present her to Himself as a glorious church without a spot or a wrinkle or any blemish. Instead, she will be holy and without fault. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as they love their own bodies. For a man who loves his wife actually shows love for himself. No one hates his own body, but feeds and cares for it, just as Christ cares for the church, and we are members of His body. The same thing here. He alludes to wives twice. He talks about Christ 4 times. So, man, when you read this, it's all about who Christ is, all about your relationship to Christ, more than it is even about your relationship to your wife. Because the reality is, in all of our lives, if our relationship to God is right, our relationship to our spouse is more likely to be right. And in a marriage where both the husband and the wife, both of their relationships are right with Christ, the more possibility, almost a reality, that their relationship with one another will be right. And so when we read these verses, we see that God's given us instruction. I think what's sort of funny about that is we say, well, how did Christ love the church? Well, we're in the wives section. We sort of ascertained. We sort of say, all right, here's what he did. But for the men, I guess we're sort of slow, so he literally spelled it out for us. What did Christ do for the church? Well, one, he gave up his life for her. Why did he do that? To make her holy and clean, washed by the cleansing of God's word. He did this to present her to himself as a glorious church, without a spot or wrinkle or any blemish. Instead, she will be holy and without fault. So our relationship with Christ is what is priority in our relationship with our spouse. It's hard pressed for you to get your relationship with your spouse right, like right, without having your relationship with God right. And so when these desires turn to expectations, instead of putting these expectations on one another, what we need to be doing is submitting to one another. And it becomes not a, you do for me, I will do for you. It becomes a, what can I do for you type of question in our life and in our marriage. And so there's three pictures I want to show you up here on the screen. And they sort of represent, I saw this on Facebook a while back, and it was, to me, it was powerful. If God is at the top and him and her, whoever they may be, are at the bottom, they may try to get closer this way, but it's hard to get close this way without getting closer to God. Especially, can I just say this? Especially for those of us that are believers. Especially for those of us that are believers, because if we are true believers and Christ is in our life, and Christ has saved us, and His Holy Spirit is present in our life, there's some things that He's not going to even allow us to do in this regard to one another. And so that's how some of us live our lives. Show the second picture there. Some of us live in a marriage where one of the spouses, I just picked the her there but one of the spouses is growing closer to God while the other one is still staying away. And if you're in this kind of a marriage, chances are you're frustrated. Chances are you're growing with Christ, but chances are I've seen in these kind of situations where you're growing and your spouse is sort of mocking. You know, you're trying to do your devotions and they're like, what are you doing? That God thing? I mean, you're trying to grow closer to God and you're praying or going to church or whatever, and they're just sort of mocking. And if you live in that kind of situation, you know that you're probably frustrated. Show the third one. But the relationship where the man and the woman, where they both are growing closer to God, will bring them closer to one another. Some of us need a marriage makeover, if we could just be really honest. Because some of us are living in this phase. Some of us are still expecting. Some of us are still putting on our spouses, you do for me first, and then I will do for you, instead of submitting to one another. Most of us wake up in the morning and say, how can I make my life better today? Instead of saying, how can I make my spouse's life better today? And yet the reality is, if we grow in our relationship with Christ, if we grow closer to our relationship with Christ, we will grow in our relationship to one another. Chances are, if you're in one of those three stages, chances are you could look at those three pictures and say, that one represents our marriage today. That one represents where we're at. And what I want to encourage you with today, for the husband and for the wife, is that your marriage is so much more about who Christ is than who your spouse is. Your marriage is so much more about what Christ has already done for you, what Christ has already offered to you, than any expectations you're going to try to put on your spouse. And some of you in here are newly married or newlyweds or have been married a short period. I mean, when you get to 26 years, you can look back and say, yeah, you've been married a short period of time. And I know there's some of you that are at 40 years or whatever. But some of you, on the scale of how long you're going to be married, are still down here. And what I'm trying to say to you is stop putting the expectations on your spouse. Stop using the words like, I'm not, I want, me, my, and start saying to yourself, Christ, what can I do today? that would be a reflection of Christ to my wife? What can I do today that would be a reflection of Christ to my spouse? What can I do today to make my spouse's life better this week? A marriage makeover. Some of us need a marriage makeover. I can tell you honestly that Monica and I have worked through the cleaning the house issue. It took a while. I'm not going to lie. I mean, when you've been raised 23 years to not do whatever, and you've been raised 22 years, 23 years to always do, I mean, it took us a while to work through that. But we have. In the end, it comes back more to what can I do for her? What can I do to submit to her? What can I do to think about her feelings and issues? And what can she do to think about me or my feelings or my issues? Submitting to one another. I want to give you guys a challenge this week. If you're here today and you're married, I want you to write down something that you could do for your spouse this week that would make their life better. Something that you could do. It might be one thing that you could do every day. It might be some different things that you could do throughout the week. But I want you to really think about, what could I do this week to be a reflection of Christ in my marriage, to be a reflection of what Christ has already done for us in our marriage? What could I do this week to submit to my spouse by humbling myself, by serving them? What can I do this week to do that? And then if you're here today and you're single, like we talked about last week, I want to encourage you, you're not off the hook, because these are spiritual principles, not just marriage principles. So I'm going to encourage you to write down somebody that